And this will take some tension off some links, and now it's a little bit easier to do some work on the chain. A few different kinds of lubes out there. You've got dry lube, you've got wet lube. Dry lube is for riding in anywhere from mountains to city to street, as long as you're not riding in any wet weather conditions. This stuff will wash off. You want to lube it about every, I'd say, 4 or 5 rides, or when the chain starts making noise. Wet lube is good for more extreme riding, wet weather riding. It sticks to the chain better. Usually, I'd say 8 to 10 rides you want to apply some more wet lube. Or if you wash your bike at any time, you should always re-lube your components. First you want to do is you're going to put about a drop on every link. Once you've got the lube on, go ahead and let it sit for a few minutes, and then we're going to come back and actually take a rag, and you're just going to wipe the lube off. Remember, you want the lube in your chain, not on the chain. This way dirt's not going to stick to it. It's going to keep it pretty clean. Your rear gears are known as your cassette. Each individual gear is called a cog. Usually get about a couple thousand miles on one of these cassettes. It's about 2 or 3 chains life worth. If you wait too long to put your chain on, of course you're going to wear the rear cassette out to where you'll put it on and it's not going to work well with your chain. A sign of a worn cassette, if you've already put a new chain on it and it's still slipping in the back, it's possible you need a new cassette. The actual teeth on the cogs will start to get kind of a hook shape to them, and they'll start getting real pointy and sharp. So that might be a time for a replacement cassette. First, remove the wheel. To remove your cassette, you're going to need an adjustable wrench, a cassette lock ring tool, and a chain whip. First thing you're going to do is remove the quick release of the wheel. I'm going to go ahead and place this chain whip on the cassette. This is going to help you hold it. Insert the lock ring tool. You're going to go ahead and loosen it with the adjustable wrench. And the cassette should pull right off. Installing a new cassette is fairly simple. You want to make sure that you're replacing it with the same type of cassette. For example, you don't want to use a Campy cassette with a Shimano drivetrain. First thing you're going to do is you're going to find one of these grooves on the freewheel body is actually smaller than the rest of them. You're going to line that up with the cassette. Go ahead and install it. And the other rings, you don't have to worry about putting them on wrong. They only go on one way. And insert the lock ring. And go ahead and tighten it down. You don't need the chain whip to do this. And it's ready to be installed back on the bike. Now go outside for a little test spin, and if you're getting some skipping coming from the back end here, you might need to replace your chain. It's a good idea to know how to pull your crank off in case you ever need to do any bottom bracket work or possibly replace some chain rings. You're going to need an Allen wrench and a crank puller. First thing you want to do is you're going to remove the crank bolt. Just take it completely out. Next we're going to insert the crank puller tool. Go ahead and carefully thread that in there. It wouldn't hurt to apply some grease on these threads of the crank puller, make it a little smoother. Make sure it's all the way in the crank. Go ahead and turn this around to the right and it will pull the crank right off. You're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the non-drive side. Alright, to install the crank, you just place the crank arm on the spindle. Before you install the crank bolt, you're going to apply some grease to it, And of course, if it's titanium, you want to use an anti-seize. You're going to get your Allen wrench. Go ahead and tighten it down. And go ahead and do the same thing to the non-drive side. This is a bottom bracket. You can't actually see it when it's installed in the bike. It mounts in between both crank arms, and there's a bearing on each side. If you're riding and you're hearing a little bit of creaking, popping noise, maybe it's time to remove the crank and pull the bottom bracket out, clean it, grease it, and put it back in. If there feels to be a little bit of play, it's possible that the bearings are worn, and it's actually a cartridge. You can't just adjust it. You take it out, throw it away, and put a new one in. To check for play, the first thing you actually want to do is check your crank bolts to make sure they're tight. And next, grab the crank arm, not the pedal, and the frame, and go ahead and side to side rock the crank back and forth. You shouldn't feel any play at all. If there is a little bit of play, it might be time to go ahead and replace that bottom bracket. There's several different tools for this job. The best thing I could say is to go down to your local bike shop and ask them exactly what bottom bracket tool you'll need. You're also going to need an adjustable wrench or possibly a ratchet. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the non-drive side bottom bracket cup just to kind of get some tension off the drive side. Now the left side is a regular thread. You're going to turn it to the left. Now I'm going to come over to the drive side, and this is reverse thread. I'm going to turn it to the right to loosen. Go ahead and take it all the way out. Now completely remove the non-drive side cup. There's two different styles of bottom bracket. You've got your square tapered spindle and you've got a spline spindle. Of course, it has to match the crank arms. So when you replace your bottom bracket, it's probably easiest just to take it down to your local shop and have them match it up and measure it so you get the right one. If you've got a brand new frame and you're not sure what bottom bracket you need, the two measurements you're going to want is the spindle length and the width of the bottom bracket shell. The width of the bottom bracket shell will either be a 68 or a 73, and some bottom brackets today can adjust either size. The next thing you need is a spindle length, which depends on what crankset you use. We're going to install the bottom bracket. Before you do, there's a little bit of prep work to be done. You want to make sure that the threads inside the bottom bracket shell are very clean, as well as the threads on the bottom bracket are clean. You want to make sure you want to grease the threads really, really well. And if you're using a titanium bottom bracket, be sure to use tie prep instead of grease. The first thing I do